everybody. Welcome to the Training, Learning, and Development community. Happy Monday to you. It's afternoon for me over here on the West Coast. I hope you guys are having a good day and that your week is starting out good. Great guest today, Bhakti Karkare. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yeah. I've been practicing that one. And we're going to be talking about bringing facilitation into the workflow. And there is a lot to talk about on this one. Bhakti and I have been going back and forth about her session today over the last few weeks. And she is so passionate about this topic and she knows so much. We definitely won't be able to cover everything in this hour. But at the very least, we can get into it. And I'm sure you guys are going to find a ton of value in it. And let me just give some shout outs to folks that are in right now. Oh, looks like we have Mark in, Mo Ash, Dorota, nice to see you, Christina, Elizabeth, Kanisi, Swarna Gupta, Wayeta, thanks for joining us this afternoon or today. And yeah, let's just get into some of the questions. Now, I have, there are 10 questions in the Ask a Question area at the bottom of your screen. You'll see that there. We've got 10 already loaded. Feel free to answer some. We're going to be just going through these and quizzing Bhakti on her topic. And I think that this is going to be a fun session. So Bhakti, first of all, tell us about your career and then tell us about facilitation.
I love talking about it. First of all, thanks for having me here. It's been a pleasure to know you, Louis, over the last few months, and discussing this with you has been fun. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone who has joined us today here. So my career has almost all been in India. We moved from India 2 years back to the US, and all my work has been around learning and development, consulting, and facilitation. I got specifically interested in facilitation at a really early stage when I started facilitating certain complex workshops. And that process was really intriguing to me. Just to see magic happening in front of your eyes, and we're going to talk about that magic more, but just to see how a group unfolds and comes up with brilliant insights and learning for itself and for the facilitator was really amusing to me. And my last role in AmDocs really gave me an opportunity to look at facilitation from a scientific perspective. I was leading a facilitator development program. And, when you have to teach someone something that you know well, you have to really look at it from a very different perspective. You have to understand why something is happening, not just what is happening. And that's where I started looking at facilitation in terms of what exactly happens with groups when they are put into facilitated environments. And that got me going. And after I left my job at AmDocs to move here, I've been thinking about facilitation from various angles and how it can find application outside workshops and meetings.
Right. Now, let me back up a little bit. I know you have an MBA, right?
Yeah.
And after, and it looks like I looked at your LinkedIn profile. You've kind of been sort of in the world of learning and development for is it about 8 years, 8 or 10 years, somewhere around there?
Almost 9 years, yes.
Yeah. And so then you got into, so you found facilitation, and I think it's unique kind of thinking about the science of facilitation. Like, what was it? What drove you to actually say, hey, okay, there's something to this. What is the fabric of facilitation anyway? Why did you start thinking in that way?
Like I said, I was really, naturally, I felt I was good at facilitation. Of course, it requires a lot of preparation, but I don't know if it was my personality or just my passion about the art that I was really good at it. When I was asked to teach it to others, it's a very different thing. I mean, you cannot just go out there and tell people, okay, be awesome. It's an awesome thing to do. You have to tell them how to be awesome and what it takes, what are the techniques, what are the tools, how do you start at the basic level and then move to the advanced level, what kind of practice is required, and what kind of practice environments do you require for that? And that really got me into looking at the fabric of it, like you said, why group processes and groups move in a certain direction when they are asked by facilitators to do that.
Wow, that's fascinating. And so now let's get into facilitation itself. I think we were talking earlier, you were wanting to ask the audience what they thought facilitation was. And
I
because you would ask me, what, what do you think facilitation was? I'm like, I think facilitation is cool, but I don't know how to answer that one. So in chat, I don't know. How do you want to ask this question,
Yeah,
Bhakti?
I would love to see just, some definitions of facilitation that people have in their mind. What does it mean to them? Because we were discussing, and I said, I want to talk about how to bring facilitation out of the workshops. But then we started talking about facilitation, and you said, wow, there are some insights here. And if I start talking about facilitation from a very fundamental level, then we have a long chat. So I want to see if the group really, understands what facilitation is, and then we can take it from there.
Right, because, and so please, you guys, if you can, just type in chat, what do you think facilitation is? And I'm just going to tell you, like, when I consider the conversations that I have here with TLDC and with the community, I think about, I want to facilitate sort of open conversation. I want to just get things out of people that maybe they wouldn't ordinarily like consider or think of. I want to just have, a friendly conversation and facilitate sharing of ideas and resources. And right now, Sky is saying facilitation is creating a space for conversations, leveraging the group's knowledge to guide the direction.
Yeah.
Elizabeth says guiding and directing participants to work through a topic or reflect and discover what each has been learning. Swarn is saying ways of engaging participants in creating and discovering learning. Yeah. And Mark's guiding versus training people to an agreed upon goal. That's a good one. I think we're probably going to touch on that a little later when we had talked a little bit about instructing versus facilitating. So that's a good one, Mark.
So this really helps. I mean, this is clearly part of the definition of facilitation. And of course, there is no one definition of facilitation because it has so many applications. But this is what it means, guiding and directing and taking a group to a particular goal while creating the right space and environment for them to be able to share what they bring to the group. So in short, facilitation is less about the facilitator and more about the group. A lot of time when we teach facilitation, we make it a point that the facilitators understand that a lot of what is happening in the group is not because of you, but it's your responsibility as a leader. And it's a very, very strange kind of a definition of facilitator when we say it's a leader, because actually you don't have the authority on the group, but you are leading them in a certain direction. And that's very important as a facilitator. And like Sky mentioned here, creating a safe space is another big responsibility for people to be able to open up and share their insights and be vulnerable and even say, I don't understand something or I don't agree with this. And that space is part of the facilitation process.
I love it. So let's touch upon sort of what Mark is saying here and what we had talked about before. You had given me a great example about, was it instructing versus facilitating?
Yeah.
And it sort of spoke to me because I'm kind of a foodie. So let's talk about that. What's the difference between instructing and facilitating?
Yeah. So for me, it's pretty evident that instruction and facilitation are two different worlds. But to help people understand in a very simplistic manner, imagine a very well hosted party versus a barbecue session or a grill session. So in the party, the host is responsible for everything that's happening around. They have a strict schedule and they know what's going to get served at what time. And if something goes wrong, the entire responsibility lies on this host. And if things go wrong, people will be readily able to blame the host for the party going wrong, or even a small specific of the party going wrong. While when people are just grilling together, let's say if I call you and a few people here to come grill with me and just do a barbecue session, I'm not responsible for everything. That the setting is different. We are all going to grill together and we're going to eat together. Someone might bring some stuff that they want to grill. So the responsibility of the success of this session is not only on me. It's on the group. And that's how I like to create these two distinctions. That facilitator, although I am the one who has invited you and I'm the one who will be ultimately responsible for some kind of enjoyment and fun, but we are all collaborating together. And that's the sort of distinction. An instructor has the has the responsibility of the content, but a facilitator has the responsibility of the content and the process. And
I
like
love
someone
it.
mentioned here, the process is the setting and how the group is going to transform in the process.
Yeah, which I, in simplest terms, I can just think about how whenever my wife and I have kind of a gathering here where I barbecue and she puts the rest of the party together, I guess she's the facilitator and I'm just the one sitting behind the grill
Yeah.
cooking whatever food. So that's why it sort of speaks to me. Now,
Yeah.
you're really, really passionate about this topic. You can talk about it for days and days and days, but you have these ideas about learning,
Yeah.
facilitation for learning in the workflow.
Hmm.
Can
Hmm.
we start talking about that now?
Yeah, yeah. So in the process of developing facilitators, a lot of time I got insights from these facilitators coming back to me telling that learning facilitation, of course, has helped them deliver better meetings and workshops, but it has changed something in them, something in their interpersonal relationships, their managerial styles, their team dynamics changed because of the way they look at people and group dynamics. So simple things like there was this manager who was one of my facilitators, and about 1.5 years in the process, we were just having a one-on-one, and he said, Bhakti, I had a conflict with someone, and normally I'm a very aggressive leader, and when there is a conflict and I know that my point of view is right, I come across very strongly with that point of view. But facilitation has changed that in me. I'm now more willing to listen, and I'm more accepting of ideas. I come from a reflective mindset than a very objective mindset. I try to ask questions to understand insights rather than just get to the goal in my way, through my way. So I've had numerous conversations with people who are learning or have learned facilitation and have done a lot of it, which told me there is something more to facilitation, and what they are learning in to deliver workshops is actually going out of the workshops and into their real life and their workflow, how they are engaging people around them and how their behavioral patterns are changing. And that was my first trigger to see facilitation beyond classrooms and meetings and workshops, and how can it work. Another time which really kind of I look back at that incident and I feel that okay, this was facilitation in the workflows when it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. In one of my roles, a manager came to me with a very strong and sad story. He said, suddenly my customer has given a very bad feedback to my team, and I I'm appalled by it, and I don't know how to share it with my team sensitively because there is already attrition issue. And can you help me do something so that they open up and they talk about it very objectively and get on board to this change? And I helped them design a facilitated session where we did what we call a reverse brainstorming. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of the reverse brainstorm, but go ahead. Yeah.
It's really interesting. You instead of posing a problem, you or a question, you say, how do you reverse the problems? For example, in a customer service kind of an environment, you would ask people, okay, tell me ways to satisfy customers or do better. Instead of that, you ask a question, you ask the opposite question, how do you dissatisfy customers? And it sounds very silly and it sounds
Yeah.
very very odd and not in place, but then people start saying all these things that okay, it's very easy to dissatisfy a customer, right? And they started in this session. Of course, we created some icebreaker for them to kind of be open to ideas, and then we asked them, how do you dissatisfy your customer? And they started giving answers like, okay, don't answer to an escalation or break the SLA all the time, and very silly stuff. But they basically got these 25, 30 ideas of how to dissatisfy customer. It was all on the board. And then you ask them, let's eliminate what all do we never do. And trust me, after 4 or 5 of those, they said, okay, I do some of these.
Mm.
I intentionally do things that could dissatisfy my customer, but I have my reasons to do it. Of course, everyone has some reasons. And that got the team started to the idea, okay, we do dissatisfy our customers intentionally. And this manager who was sitting with me and who was co-facilitating this session kind of got into the deep of, into the weeds with them. Why did you do that? What do you need from me so that you don't have to do this? Let's say if there is a bureaucracy issue, there's a systems issue, the tool is not working, and that's why sometimes people keep customers on hold. And how can we help? And how do we change from here? And that started an entire learning intervention. And when I look back at this, I hardly did anything. I just kind of helped this person create the right environment so that people could open up and talk about their issues and really be in a place where they can move forward. And I think this could have been done by this manager if they knew the basics of facilitation. And this is what I want to give to people. I think learning facilitation is not rocket science. It requires a lot of commitment. It requires certain skills and mindsets. But beyond that, if you can really understand this art and science, you can, as a manager or leader or as an individual, if you use it in the workflow, you'll see some amazing collaboration, innovation, and collective work happening in the teams.
Right. So what I'm seeing here, like consistently, is kind of the guiding principle, like Sky and Elizabeth were talking about, and then like having that open space, or that space for having safe conversations. Those are important pieces. And then also just the leadership component, like how important that is to be able to act as a leader. Now, like within the workflow, you have something, what was it called? It was the facilitation flip. Is that the reverse brainstorming thing you're talking about? Or can you explain that a little bit?
So I'll be very honest. This is very new in the way I start to explain people. There's so much to explain, starting from the concept of facilitation and then talking about how do we take it beyond classroom, that I thought if I can create some kind of a guideline for people to help imagine how facilitation can work in the workflow. And that's why I started talking about it in the terms of facilitation flip. So I'm saying flip a few group processes that we see every day in our teams. And when you facilitate them, the flip happens. For example, a simple conflict in a team. If you facilitate, the conflict can be flipped into a perspective sharing session. If there is a problem solving, let's say, session or discussion, even an email that's talking about a certain problem, if you facilitate it in a discussion, it has the potential to flip into reflection. So what I'm saying is just look at the processes that you're doing in your group as a leader, facilitate to flip them into something more meaningful. It's there, it's right there. Whatever you're doing on a day-to-day basis as a leader or as a manager, facilitate some part of it to create these meaningful group processes like innovation, collective decision making, innovative problem solving, creative sessions, reflections. And that's what I was talking about when I said it flips the group process into something more meaningful.
Right. So is that kind of a tool that you use? Do you have like a series of, like when you're trying to guide people, like when you're doing the facilitation, are there like certain tools in your head, or like sort of instruments that you use to like to be able to create these situations where you're doing better as a guide, or doing better to help open up safe conversations?
So when a seasoned facilitator or someone who knows what they're doing as a facilitator in a workshop or a meeting setting, they definitely know what the flow is. What is the objective, first of all? How much time do they have at hand? What is the audience like? How comfortable the audience is with each other, or are they completely new to each other? And then they kind of design the entire flow of the session or the time that they have together in order to first start with creating the safe space. So things like, icebreakers, or just a round of introduction and hopes and concerns. There are different things that people do to just get the group to the same page and feel safe in that space. And then we go into the content. But you have to understand that a facilitated session is like a delicate balance between content and process. And I cannot tilt in one direction too much, otherwise it will spoil the balance. So a facilitator's endeavor is constantly to see how I'm bringing the content together while minding the process that's happening in the group. By process, I mean things like how individuals are interacting with each other, how they are interacting with the facilitator, how individuals are perceiving their difference of opinions. How can I make their difference of opinions and diversity come together to create reflection together? Are they pursuing a common goal or not? Do they have different goals? What are those goals? That's the process. And if I ignore this process, then like I said, then we are just going in instruction mode. That's what generally an instructor does. It doesn't matter what the process group is going through. What is important is that they understand this content. But for a facilitator, these two are very important. And of course, you cannot ignore the content. So when we say that someone other than a facilitator, let's say you, you are not a facilitator, although you do a terrific job of doing these discussions, and I think you have
Right.
some elements of facilitation in you. But if you really want to get a group going as a facilitator, then you will have to mind all these things together, plus really learn a few basic skills of facilitation that that I have been helping a lot of facilitators with in my career. Skills like listening skills, how to use questions to create discussion, how to deal with resistance. Every group has a resistance towards their leader, and facilitator in that space is a leader. So how do I accept this resistance and work with it for my advantage? So there are, if I have to say foundational skills, there are 5 or 6 foundational skills that every facilitator has to learn, and they have to invest in those skills, practice those skills intentionally, and then they have to understand how groups operate. So that's another part of the training, and then they have to have the right mindset. And that's what the framework that I'm going to talk about is all about. How do we get started in this journey if we are interested in facilitating this for our teams?
Cool. Well, I'm interested in learning how to be a better facilitator. So maybe we should just get straight into it and talk about that. So I like that you were just listing off these skills, because I mean, one question that I'm just going to throw out there, it wasn't on any of the lists or anything that we talk about. How do you know that you're working with a good facilitator? Like, what are some of the qualities of a good facilitator?
Wow. It opens so many memories, because I have recruited facilitators in facilitator development programs, and sometimes it's just in the first kind of demo that they give, this is not the right fit for facilitation.
Right.
Yeah. I think the first quality I look for is lack of arrogance. I mean, a good facilitator knows they can't operate from a state of superiority. Even though they are leaders of that group and they have complete authority over the group, they cannot seem superior. They have to come to a place where they can feel equal. Others can feel equal with them. And when I sense that kind of an arrogance, it's going to be hard. And sometimes I have made those compromises, because they bring something else, because it's such an umbrella skill. It's one part of the group. But yeah, if I have to eliminate someone for this kind of an intervention, then yes, they have to have a very humble personality, I would say, to eagerness to learn and accept groups and people. And
so Bhakti, is that a challenge, especially because people that are like doing facilitation have to have leadership qualities? And so a lot of times, I mean, leaders just tend to have egos, so do you run into that a lot?
Yeah, so facilitative leadership is a type of leadership style. I don't believe too much in styles, but facilitation for leadership comes from a very different place. If you want to be a facilitative leader, you cannot be coming from a very authoritative position. It's definitely a very democratic style of leadership,
Nice.
because we are ultimately talking about working with groups as part of groups. So it's very important to understand that difference. And if that's not your style, it's not going to work. And let's be honest, it's not for everyone. I'm not saying that everyone can be a facilitator or should be a facilitator, but it's definitely a style to look at, and it's definitely a way of leading teams towards a common goal in a very collaborative manner, especially today when we're seeing the leadership being democratized so much. Even leadership programs and leadership development theories understand that leadership is not only about authority. It is so much more about collaboration and getting people together rather than leading them by direction. So for me, I think it's very important in today's changed reality that facilitation is going to be a cornerstone for people who want to bring change in their teams and get people going. So it's something definitely good to look at and try to see if you can accommodate in that style.
I like it. Sky said, when you're a facilitator, it's not about you, it's about the group and their understanding of the content.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
That's a great point. Okay, so let's talk about. We wanted to focus some time on your framework.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So let's talk about the framework that you're developing, and I find it fascinating. Just I haven't met a lot of people I haven't met anyone before that really thought about facilitation from a scientific perspective, and so I'm really, really interested in how you're putting this together.
That comment sometimes really scare me. and it fascinates me. Why? Because for me, sometimes it's so obvious, it's out there, and no one is if no one is thinking in that direction, am I thinking something wrong? And that's a really, natural tendency of human mind to think, if someone else is not thinking, am I off base here? So I'm also just evolving and trying to see if it can find application in the ways that I envision. So what I tried to do, and I'm still trying, is to create a framework to help people first understand what facilitation is and how can it be applied outside of workshops. So I'll just share my screen for a moment
Okay.
to display the framework, and you will let me know. This is a little different than Zoom, so yeah.
Yeah, mouse over your screen. You should see a little computer icon with an arrow on it, and that should get you to. There you go. And I remember last time it took a little bit for it to load. There we go. Okay. All right.
So it's let me go back. It's really not just not a very descriptive framework, but more about understanding what the concept is. And what I try to do is imagine a person who wants to use facilitation and wants to get started, and I'm assuming they don't have any background in facilitation. If they do, a lot of it can be omitted for them. But if someone who doesn't understand facilitation, they have to go through they have to combine 3 steps together to be able to do what I'm saying is bringing facilitation in the workflow. First is they have to prepare and look at their mindset, like we spoke about it. It comes from a very different space. You cannot facilitate from a very authoritative space. You have to come down to the group together, and you have to prepare your intention. What am I going to do? Why do I want to facilitate? And why I cannot just operate in my normal routine style. So the intention to facilitate is to create collaboration in teams, is to bring teams together to work towards a common objective, to really get to understand people and influence the process that they are going through so that they collaborate and work together. Second is you have to have a mindset of preparation. And basically what I'm saying is growth mindset. It's a mindset of I'm ready to invest, because facilitation doesn't happen impromptu. And it's actually a little sad, but it's true that you cannot say that, okay, I'm going to go and facilitate without any preparation. It has to be a very prepared effort, understanding the audiences and understanding what they need and in that moment, and how I can build processes around that. And then action, which is really preparing what am I going to do with them, and how am I going to do that, how I'm going to start it, and how am I going to end it. So that's the mindset part of it. That is the prep, the primer, the foundation of it. And then, like I talked about, this specific skills that you need to build to be able to facilitate. Otherwise, you'll just be an instructor, right? So how to use questions, your ability to lead discussions, and content versus process, some basic skills that can be learned either through very regulated workshops or individually. Or you may feel I have certain skills that I have used and I'm very confident, and then gaining more exposure to other skills. And then the third and most crucial part of it is how do we bring it into the workflow? And that starts, I think, with observation, looking at the team's routines. What is my team doing right now? And where are the opportunities to facilitate more discussions, facilitate more collaboration and reflective sharing? I read somewhere, and I realized that a lot of what learning teams are doing today is around delivery and providing content, and sometimes igniting conversations. But a major part of learning is reflection, and a very little space is given to people in today's hard realities, tough realities, to reflect on what they just learned, or to even reflect if they have learned something from the experience. And that reflection comes a lot from facilitating conversations. And that's what we are talking about. Where are those existing team routines where people can start discussing things? Where are the points of needs? Where do people need help? For example, I remember a very simple one-on-one with my manager in Amdocs, and we were just talking about my challenges. And in that conversation, we just kept going, and she said, you should talk to this person and this person, and they would probably give you how to give you advice on how to approach this third person that I'm having challenge with. And to me, that was a learning, because how to approach a certain individual in the organization, what are their needs, and every organization has some political undercurrents that that comes from conversation that you understand from these sessions. And I think those can be facilitated to really give people ease in operating in through their day to day in their workflow. Another interesting thing that one of my managers used to do was to just shuffle some tasks responsibilities, very impromptu. Let's say I'm used to doing a certain task day in and day out, it's a part of my role, and someone else is doing another task, and once in a while they would just shuffle, and that created a lot of conversation between the two of us, and probably had a need, required us to reach out to other people in teams to find out solutions. And that is also a way of facilitating conversations. So a facilitator knows this, how they do it in workshops. I'm asking people to look at how that can be replicated in the workflow outside of formal settings. You were asking something.
No, just
Okay.
yeah.
So,
But I do have a question on the skill side. Can you just clarify content versus process? What does that mean?
this understanding of content versus process, a lot of time we get bogged down by either one. Let's say if a manager wants to get a group to understand a new policy, and they want the group to also get on board with that change, right? One option is to get too heavily into the content of that policy as to how to do it and what is it, and they just talk about it on and on without getting the group's consensus, understanding their requirements, understanding what they feel about it, etc., etc. Some managers might go to the other extreme and just focus on, okay, what do you feel and how do you want me to go about it, without focusing on what's important, what's the matter at hand. And that balance is a skill that facilitators learn in their training.
No, this is great. So with this chart, does that mean, like, are we talking that the mindset is the most important thing, since this is kind of at the base and covers the
Yeah,
largest part of this pyramid?
I like to call
Yeah.
it the primer. You cannot skip that and expect to be a great facilitator. You may skip one of the skills and come with the right mindset, and you may learn it on the go. But if that mindset is not prepped into being that zone of learning and to be in that zone of facilitation, I don't think you can succeed.
Wow. So this is a great chart. I love this slide. This is, if anybody in the chat, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to drop it into the chat area. So this is a lot to take in too.
Yeah.
And if you're a manager or something, this is probably just a lot to consider altogether.
Yeah.
Where do you find the time to be able to do all of this?
This has been, the most burning question for me. And a lot of people that I shared this with came up with this obvious question. Okay, I'm a manager, and I don't even have time to complete my tasks. I'm looking for ways to delegate and see how I can prioritize my time. And now you're asking me to look at all this and create this kind of collaboration, which is not a part of my JD, let's say. And to answer this question, I go back to a lot of what leaders talk about collaboration. I've been researching a lot about why leaders suddenly want to collaborate, or why do they give so much importance to collaboration, creating collaboration. And I was listening to a leader say that for me, collaboration is not just a great thing to have in team, it's my time management tool. And their perspective on collaboration is, if I get my teams to collaborate, if I get my teams to work together, it frees me of the responsibility of researching things, of really looking at data too much, or brainstorming with them. And it frees time for me to be strategic and do things that I have to do to direct them. And to me, that really resonates, because if a manager or a leader thinks that creating collaboration is a responsibility beyond their role, they're really mistaken in their understanding of what they need to do as a leader. And if they can find even some time to facilitate conversations in their team, they'll see how much value it can provide them, how much their team's engagement levels will go higher, how much their teams are willing to share and create new solutions. And I think it goes beyond just the leader's desire to create collaboration. It is the need of the hour. It is what organizations are struggling to do, to create engagement, to create high-performing teams. And it goes into that. Imagine a team which has been put into facilitated environments like a workshop. and they coming out of their work with this awe of, oh my God, I didn't realize how I learned something really great today without having to take a course, or I didn't know what other person on my team was doing and how I could really take so much value from it, or I no one ever shared this insight with me. This is what I'm talking about. This is what happens in workshops, and that can happen in teams if someone takes responsibility of facilitating this dialogue.
Yeah. No, that really, I mean, it resonates with me too. That makes total sense. I'm just curious. How did you learn this? Like, were there experiences that you had where you were in a leadership role or manager or just working on a team, and you just saw this collaborative element became just such, was
So
obviously a positive way to go to help the manager to the leader of your organization?
I just learned by facilitating. So
Yeah.
all these insights are coming from a place of facilitators. But I think as a facilitator, I have led teams a lot, and I've seen groups transform and do amazing things together. And then I've consulted a lot of leaders and managers in my role as a L&D consultant. So
Mhm.
I want to connect those two worlds. I know that there is something great happening in workshops and meetings which are facilitated by seasoned facilitators, and the needs of managers and leaders to create collaboration. And why can't these two worlds come together and draw something from each other? That's where my insights are coming from.
Love it. Okay. So now we have all this information. You're talking about your mindset, skills, routines, just all this background. How do you get an L&D team sort of on board with this? How do they get started using facilitation to help achieve their objectives?
So I've been thinking a lot about it, that if there's an established L&D team in a, let's say, in a bigger organizational setup, there is a different approach to adopting this framework or really starting to do this. And maybe a startup L&D team, or not really an L&D team, but just a single person who wants to start something new, there's a different approach. For established teams, I think a lot of big organizations have this big pool of trainers and facilitators in sitting there. A lot of organizations have invested a lot in developing internal trainers, through train to trainers, through facilitation development programs, um, even people like HRs who are primed for facilitation. They know facilitation because they are taught in a certain manner. They're taught to connect with people in a certain manner. And I think that's a good starting point to invest in. A lot of facilitators who used to do workshops in classrooms have been rendered, I wouldn't say useless, but they're not doing that art. They are doing converting their sessions into online training, or they're just doing virtual workshops. And that capability should not die. That capability of creating groups and transforming groups can be used in this. So first starting point could be these trainers or facilitators can be, made to understand this framework and then asked to help managers deploy it in their teams. So that's a partnership that I see happening in a lot of big organizations. The second channel would be the L&D partners. A lot of L&D teams have partners or touch points in different business units who are also trained in a consultative approach. They can also start understanding this framework and work side by side with managers to look at routines and see how facilitative opportunities can be created. And third is going full blown with a starting point, really recruiting some managers who are primed for this, who understand, who are eager to create collaboration, and working with them to enhance their skills, and in their flow of work, helping them to quickly start deploying these practices and start to facilitate in the workflow. That's how I see this happening. Does that
Wow.
make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Elizabeth is saying, I've enjoyed a wonderful collaborative environment with the team I'm on. Now I can see that our lead's extensive experience as a facilitator made it natural for her to foster collaboration and
Yeah,
collective decision making. That
that's
just seems like, yeah, that's like the optimal situation.
yes.
And so
Thanks, Elizabeth, for saying that, because I always felt that uh, I want to see how facilitators who become managers in future, or who come from a facilitation background, is there a difference in the way they operate? And this gives kind of a validation to that theory. So thanks for sharing that.
yeah. And so, at Amdocs, you're a learning and organizational development partner.
I
Um,
was, I was.
what's that?
I was.
Oh, you was,
Yeah.
that's right. Or you were, sorry.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do now? Do you go into organizations like as a consultant and just help build facilitation skills for leaders and or for or L&D teams? Is that what you're currently doing?
I am starting to. I have just started building up my consulting, and I've just got this all together. It took a while for me to put these pieces together, from the world of facilitation, understanding learning, and how can I bridge this gap. And it took a while to kind of build what I have built right now. And I want to get started as a consultant. I'm still working with Amdocs as a facilitator developer, just helping them build facilitators, but I want to go beyond that. And I'm looking to build my consulting around this, and I would love to, get feedback on what I have presented here and hear some thoughts, challenges that people would like to share, and I'm open to
Okay.
learn.
Is it okay if I close this slide?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
I'm
can
going to
do.
close it and bring us
All
back
right.
up on screen. Now, I want to ask you, because this is really interesting to me, and it feels like everybody should get some facilitation skills, like
Yeah.
or but what can we do exactly to become a better facilitator? Is there anything specific? Do you go out and look for a certificate, or like do you just go to
Uh,
LinkedIn and
I believe facilitation can be learned by doing only. I mean,
uh-huh.
you have to go through certain theoretical elements of what is facilitation and undergo that process. And I'm more than open to help people do that, and that's what I want to do. That's my mission. But beyond that, you have to start facilitating, and that's one of the problems with facilitator development programs as they are currently, because you ask people to learn these skills, and then there may not be enough opportunities for them to facilitate workshops because the entire L&D landscape is changing. There are not many face-to-face workshops happening. So how do they learn? And that's where your workflow comes in place. Look at your workflow and see where can you facilitate as a leader. What are those opportunities? What are those conversations? What are those pieces where teams are craving collaboration? They want to get time to talk to each other, and we're not providing them that time, even if it's virtual. And that's the practice ground. But you will get better only by doing and finding
Right. So,
those.
yeah, how do we find situations to do? That's the thing that's sort of interesting to me, because if I wanted to become a better facilitator, like
Hmm.
would I just have to create like programs within TLDC and just bring people in so that I can, or
Uh,
like, that's what I'm wondering
for once, I feel even one-on-one conversations are opportunities to facilitate. It's not just a group process, and that's where I want to bring it. Uh, a lot of conversations that, like the way you are talking to me, we have not rehearsed this, have we? A lot of it is just happening very organically, and
yeah.
that's exactly what a facilitator does a lot of time. They use their power of questioning to just poke and nudge people to start talking more. And if you were not doing that, I'd probably right now be very nervous because I cannot remember a script. But the way you are asking questions is really probing me to talk more and let you know what I'm feeling and what I have in my mind.
There you
So
go.
we can
So I'm
utilize
good at
that.
it, I guess. I'm good. I'm good at it.
You're already there. No, but we can even start with our one-on-one conversations and see how well are we listening, how well are we using our insights to reflect back and gain more insights from the other person. That's what facilitators do. So there is a common joke in facilitator circles that, of course, facilitators are not subject matter experts, right?
Mhm.
The talk content that they are facilitating, like 2 years into my role, I was facilitating a conflict resolution workshop to a group of managers who had more than 10 to 15 years experience. Right. So I'm basically not as good at conflicts as they are, because they have dealt with conflicts much more than I. So I'm not
Mhm.
the content expert, but I still was able to do justice to that group because I could facilitate. And that's the skill. So the joke is that just reflect back. If they ask you a question, ask the group, what is your opinion? And that's what facilitators do a lot of time. That's a great tool because you don't have to know all the answers. You just need to see how I can use the group to get the answers. So it's very important to use these basic skills and then look for opportunities like one-on-one conversations, team meetings that are happening day in and day out. Even a simple email that you're sending to your team is a conversation opener. And how you can ask for insights from the team to reflect back is a great facilitation tool. look at, and things like, task reallocations, or creating new routines in teams to make sure that people have to talk to each other and share with each other to get value out of that conversation is what
Mhm.
facilitation is. And that's why this mindset of intention is very important. Do I look at opportunities to facilitate or not? And then skills will help build that.
I love it. Bhakti, this has been so valuable for me, and I hopefully the audience found it valuable as well. There's just so much to pull from. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing that
Thank
slide. We're going to have to talk about this again sometime soon. If you have any other ideas about your workflow, and that concept, if you want to share it with the group and run it by the community, I would love to have you back on. And I want to mention you are doing some work you're going to be at the Learning Solutions Conference. You're doing a presentation.
Yes.
So if anybody in the audience or listening to the broadcast, if you want to get more information about Bhakti's ideas and her concepts, she's doing a session at the Learning Solutions Conference. And how else can people reach you?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll put the link over here. If you can share my email address, that's cool too. Yeah, that's fine.
Just
Thank you
dropped
for
in your
doing that.
LinkedIn. I had it up on my screen.
Yeah, so
Okay.
please connect with me here. I would love to hear your thoughts about what I've just shared. If you have any feedback, if you have any challenges that I can help with, I'll be glad.
Thank you so much. And anybody in the audience, if you guys have any ideas or you want to discuss facilitation or building your skills as a facilitator, feel free to reach out. Luis at thetldc.com. I love this kind of a conversation. I'd love to see to talk more about it. And with that, we're going to wrap things up. Tomorrow, we do have Anya Hartleb-Parson is coming in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 Eastern. She's going to be talking about autism. And that's going to be a really great conversation. I think it's rare to talk about autism and adult learning, especially for Anya, who is absolutely brilliant. But she's autistic and she has challenges, and she's going to be discussing them. So that'll be on tomorrow morning. So please join us then. And other than that, Bhakti, thank you, and we'll see you
Thanks for
next
having
time.
me, Liz.
All right,
Thank you.
absolutely. Take care.